Alright. First of all, thank you for taking the time to meet with me.
No problem.
I got a busy schedule, so I'll try to get right into it. Alright. So one of the first things I just want to know is what exactly is a concussion?
Boy, there's a loaded question. Essentially, it is a traumatic brain injury where there's a force, a blow, whether it's a direct physical force or if it can be through shock waves, like if a bomb explodes, the impact of the explosion can affect the brain there as well, and causes a whole constellation of different symptoms in which the brain's just not functioning the way we would expect or it was before the hit.
How do concussions lead to CTE or
What's the connection?
Yes.
It's something that there's a lot of research going on right now to try to figure out as to how much, if the concussions themselves are leading to the CTE, do you have to have a concussion to have suffered CTE? Is one concussion going to give you this amount or that amount? It's all still up in the air, and part of the problem is that you can't see the effects right now until autopsy, when they can do all the special tests and such. So we're looking at things that are happening now and not potentially getting the feedback on it for 40, 50, 60 years.
Wow.
And until we get better tests and better techniques.
So there's a lot of research just have been coming up with light, just like in the past recent years, right, of like concussions and CTE and stuff. Do you think there's been like a lot of significant findings through these things, like just through this research, like?
Oh yeah, what I tell patients now is drastically different than if we were having this discussion 7 to 10 years ago. The approach to it, the rehab that we do with it, the testing that goes along with it is just so much more advanced than what we had just a few years ago. And I think, and it's certainly the public awareness has drastically increased as well. Not just getting your belly button, it's big time injuries.
Yeah. So is there a certain amount of force that has to be applied in order to get a concussion, or does that kind of just like happen like with maybe your head hitting the ground and stuff like that?
More often than not, the concussions tend to come from blows or hits or movements that you're not expecting. So for a soccer player, say, they get soccer ball booted 75 yards and they head it, well, they see it coming, they've got everything prepped and braced with their neck muscles and such, and they're okay. On the other hand, they go up for a head ball and knock heads with somebody, well, they aren't expecting that one, and that tends to lead to more concussion. Similarly, the wide receiver going across the middle, getting obliterated, so to speak, and not expecting it to come, or a car accident.
Okay, so
and it's not so much at times the direction of the force, it's also the shear and the torque that gets involved. So like the whip into the head can be much more of an issue than just the straight on knocks.
Yeah. So whenever somebody receives a concussion, what are the symptoms that they receive, like once it happens right there?
And that's where it gets really tricky as well, because everybody associates concussion with headache, but that doesn't necessarily have to be present at all. It can also take a day or two to develop, but headache, of course, is the most common one. Not acting like yourself, your thought processes are slowed, difficulty with concentration, memory, focus. Then you get into the ones that people often don't associate with concussion: nausea, vomiting, balance issues, mood issues, being more sad or more emotional than you would expect, classic example of that was Luke Kuechly last year. I don't know if you saw that game. He plays for the Carolina Panthers. Got a concussion. He was balling on the cart as they were taking him off the field. It's just the emotional effect on it. Sleep issues can also be big time. Difficulty getting to sleep, staying asleep.
And these are just
Light sensitivity, noise sensitivity,
oh, okay.
vision, of course.
And sometimes these people have to, like, when they're inside in lighted areas like this, would they have to, you know, wear shaded glasses or stuff just because of
Yep,
this?
the light sensitivity. Yep.
And these are all just, you know, symptom, or I guess stuff that happens once you get it, like within the first couple hours of receiving a concussion, right? So what about like days after, weeks after receiving?
Well, all of those could take 24 to 48 hours to show up. And that's where people get into problems, because it's so much you have that first hit, but then anything after that before brain has fully recovered can really draw out the process.
Okay.
So any of those symptoms can be the ongoing problem.
Are players more likely to receive a concussion after they get their first initial one, or?
If they have fully recovered, we essentially say they're back to baseline. Now, like I said, several years ago, I quoting different statistics that you're this many more times likely to get another one with each subsequent one. I think that we're finding that's not as tried and true as we thought it was, but it's much more dependent on other hits while you're still in that recovery phase. Like if you get a concussion and they pull you immediately from the game, you tend to get back to full status much quicker than if you even finish out the series and have further hits to the head.
Do you find that a lot more coaches, I guess just around the country and everything, that they're taking more light of the concussions, so they're trying to protect their players more? Like, have you been seeing that from countries, or been hearing about it at least?
Yeah, I think that the coaches are becoming much more aware, just like everybody else, as to the importance and the severity of concussions and how important it is to take the proper steps to get people back to full strength. Now, coaches, depending on levels as well, Division I, pro, high school, there's different expectations, different stakes, so to speak, and so different coaches will be a little bit more impatient, but that's where it comes down to the medical staff. They gotta give the guy the clearance to go back.
What are the long-term effects of this, like years down the road? Can it still have a pretty significant effect, like on your brain? Just, maybe you've had one back then, like in high school and stuff, and then later on down the road, like, I don't know, 5 years or so, he's still receiving symptoms of it or something.
Yeah, post-concussion syndrome is a very real thing, and you can have any of the symptoms that I was talking about before that can persist. Things like migraines are not unusual. Now, when it comes to the real long-term effects on cognition and dementia and things like that, that's where a lot of the CTE stuff is coming into play nowadays. And we're trying to see if those connections are real.
Yeah. So when does it become too many concussions for somebody? Like when is, you've had, I don't know, 10 or so, and then it's like, that's like, you need to cut the wire or whatever.
It's the concussions themselves, we refer to as snowflakes. Everyone's individualized and everyone's unique. And so how you respond to this one, if you came back in 7 days this time, doesn't mean that